And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my McDonald eating counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Buddy, you made it on ESPN.
All right, we're moving on. We're done. We're done.
No,
we're done talking about it
on ESPN.
It was a fun.
The Waterboy would say, "Mama I made it ESPN."
All right, it was a fun 3 days. I think we're good. Good now. We don't need to talk about it anymore.
I mean,
it's not the only thing that I've done. I've done other shit than eat at a McDonald's. I think we're past it.
No, you need to wear it like a badge of honor. I think you're getting a little too embarrassed, is what I think.
No, I'm not being embarrassed by it, but I don't think we need to bring it up every single episode. It was a couple days. It was a fun couple days. It's Wednesday.
I did see somebody. I'll have to go find it. I should have bookmarked it. I didn't. But I saw somebody on that ESPN story say, and I'm just quoting what they said. He was like, that man got gas.
Someone commented that underneath the article.
Somebody commented, and like Megan, my wife was getting home when I saw it. I should have just bookmarked it and come back to it. But somebody was like,
you didn't.
Gas. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so funny. It's so great. You know who else might have some gas, especially at running back, might be Ohio State. Joe, we'll spend a lot of time. Yeah, gas. You don't get the
continue. I get the joke. That was just an interesting analogy.
Okay, fair. Not my best. But a lot to talk about tonight with Ohio State. Number one, the Urban Meyer comments about Ohio State. What could kind of be a little prequel to our deep dive of them probably here tonight.
I was thinking about that. I almost said to you, maybe we should do the Ohio State deep dive, but you know what? We're going to milk it. We're going to talk about them today, and then we're going to do the deep dive when the season gets a little closer. I want to save the top teams. I want to do those in the final month of the lead up to the season in August. So we're not doing that
Very
yet.
Fair. Yeah, very fair. So, but it'll be a nice prequel to them. Urban Meyer's comments. Caleb Downs might be playing running back now. Credit where credit's due. Brooks Austin did report, and I reshared this since February, man. Brooks has been on this saying that the kid wants to have some running back carries. Joe, is this overkill?
I think it is a little bit, and that's going to be my take when we get to this segment. I don't mind using good athletes to make plays on the field. That's how you win football games. But at the same time, when you've got 2 elite running backs and then 2 highly recruited kids that you just brought in behind them, why are we putting your best defensive player and one of the best defensive players in the country in that position to possibly get banged up in one of the most physical positions in the sport? I just think it's better to be a little cautious. It just doesn't feel super necessary. Maybe do it once. Do it against Michigan. But I don't think it needs to be any more than that.
Apparently, it was a high selling point that he gets. I mean, Joe, like, here's the thing. It's not like, some of these things that we see, like, it may be in reference to, but the question becomes, well, Travis Hunter's doing it.
It doesn't mean that Travis Hunter doing it is,
but Joe, like,
a good decision. But wait. But it's also very, 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 very different circumstance. They are not very deep at receiver and at corner. Caleb Downs is potentially jumping into a position that is filled with.
I mean, he's my number 1 DB in the country. I mean, Joe, I think he's the best safety in the country. So I mean, I agree with you there. But the question becomes like. Now the question becomes, it's not like one of those, we're in June, like, hey, this guy might play some running back for us this year. No, like the dude's sitting in meetings. Like, Joe, when you're leaving one position group to go to another position group in meetings, for somebody, I mean, Joe, we've been in those situations. If somebody's in your meeting room, something's going on.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't take him away from the DB room if you weren't, I don't want to say just not considering it. Question becomes, though, to me, too, and which we'll ask here tonight. I mean, if you're Quinshon Judkins.
No, I don't think we need to take it that far in saying that.
No, I mean, but if you're – no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're Quinshon Judkins, what do you think?
I think it feels like, considering the fact that he is splitting carries with Travion Henderson and stepped into a situation knowing he was going to be
Travion
splitting
Henderson,
carries.
what do you think?
I don't think they care. They know that there's going to be three backs that are getting into the mix. It's not like Caleb Downs is supposed to also get 20 carries a game. That's where part of this might get a little, just a tiny bit overreactive based on what I saw on Twitter yesterday. It's going to be probably in totality maximum 20 plays the whole season. It might not even go over 20 plays the whole season. So I doubt that they care.
Well, they're trying to pacify him, and you got to do it during the summer. Joe, not the only discussion we'll have tonight about the Big Ten as we go out to Los Angeles and we talk about
US. To say.
We go out. Big Ten in Los Angeles.
That just does. Yeah. That does not feel right.
We go to the Big Ten or stay in the Big Ten in LA and talk about USC because look, this has been a lot of buzz. They're losing a pair of defensive tackles. This Juju Lewis news about Auburn has come to light. We'll talk about that too, but
yeah, look, this is very rarely do we talk about recruiting on this show, and before the USC fans
never talk about recruiting on this show.
Before the USC fans think I'm just bringing this up because I want to take shots at them. A lot of people are talking about what's happening with USC right now. It is noteworthy that they're losing 2 5-star recruits. I don't think that it signals that it's the end of the world. I don't think that we need to go to that extreme length that this is an unrecoverable situation, but it's not great. It's not great that this early on you're losing out on commitments from 2 kids in a short period of time. It kind of makes you wonder what happened leading up to this to lead to their decommitments.
It's pretty simple what you'll talk about, but here's the long and short of it. You know, like when you're in Sunday, this is what somebody asked me about this today, like what's going on at USC? Oh, look at Lincoln Riley. And they were like, why do you think they decommitted? And you know, like when you're in Sunday school and you say, Jesus, you know, like you always give the answer, Jesus, you know, like every answer to every Bible school question is Jesus. You know what it is for this one? Kirby.
I saw one of our listeners commented when I tweeted this out asking what's going on here. Somebody said that they don't want to play for a guy who can't cook a brisket. That's what that's what the issue is.
Hey man, I know that people will joke and laugh about all that, but this is the Deep South. So
I know that was why initially when these 2 kids committed, this is hater behavior. But when they were committed, it didn't feel like something that would stick for the both of them. I thought maybe one of them would decommit, not both. But it's a long way to go to travel from Georgia to USC, where I have
across the country, literally.
Yeah, where I have banged the table where I think Lincoln needs to be better is the entire western half of the country, which is why. And when we get to that segment, I'm going to talk about why I think they're doing a little bit better in that lens.
Well, look, here's the thing with USC, which we'll get to. I just don't you can't say that they got to recruit better on the line of scrimmage, and because they lose some guys in the state of that Kirby Smart resides in, I don't think it's that massive of a deal. What I do think is a massive deal is both of those kids were supposed, Gibson and Justice, were supposed to be in LA this weekend, and then they canceled their visits and decommit. Yep. So like Kirby, I think that there's a deeper message here that we'll discuss. That I think we make fun of Lincoln about it, but basically what Kirby did was send a message to the entire country.
Oh yeah,
that I think that is being overly missed here by most. So yeah, look, Joe, we got lots to discuss. A prequel of Ohio State, Urban Meyer's comments. The Caleb Downs news, and like we just mentioned, USC recruiting. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag, though, however. Joe, I got to admit, it's an all-SEC college baseball final. Tennessee will take on the winner of the next 2 games, possibly. Texas and Texas A&M and Florida. It's kind of like football.
Lacrosse was all ACC. Lacrosse was all ACC, if that means anything. It was Maryland versus Notre Dame. Lacrosse. Lacrosse was all ACC. There wasn't a single SEC team in the lacrosse playoffs.
Joe.
How many?
Because
How many
Joe,
lacrosse
because
championships does the SEC have? Zero.
how many
I don't want to hear it.
how
I
many
don't want to hear
teams
it.
does the SEC have that play lacrosse?
That's not important.
Okay. So if we wanted to take over lacrosse, we would take over lacrosse.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
Joe, you mean to tell me if Malik Neighbors got an NIL deal to play lacrosse, you really don't think?
Yeah, he'd be a
would be
great
the best
lacrosse. He'd be a
athlete?
great lacrosse player, but he wouldn't be committed to LSU. He'd be committed to other programs because
Joe,
there's better lacrosse
kids from the
programs.
state don't leave. It don't matter if it's water polo, football, baseball, tennis.
Nah.
It doesn't matter. You ain't coming to the Deep South. You know who we can ask? We'll ask Lincoln Riley in our segment in just a moment. Let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. We got lots to bet. Go over there. SEC baseball finals. Now that the NBA finals are over, it's not a lot to bet on, but you can make a lot of your picks there. Go do that now. We're back next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. Joe, do you mind if I ask you a question? Why is it that Texas A&M are always taking straight shots at teams?
What do they do now?
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
First off, you had a LSU hat on, and you talked about how crappy Kyle Field was.
I'm not wearing my hat. I just realized that. Go ahead. Continue. Sorry.
No, I'm glad you're not. But you know what? It's literally in your background. Just keep it in the background for the rest of the show.
Okay.
But they're always after people. And when your last national title was in meat judging.
Hey, man, that is a hard sport, Blake. Okay. Meat judging is a hard sport. Okay. Let's give him a little bit of credit here.
I want to say something, but this is a PG rated show. I'm not going to say it. But somebody correlated Texas A&M fans and they, about eating a Snickers bar, and they turn it upside down. Nevertheless, that is Texas A&M. Joe, we head up to Ohio, though, because they've been the talk of college football the last couple of days because of Urban Meyer's comments about his former team, that being the Ohio State Buckeyes. Look, I'm going to paraphrase what Urban said here, but it sent trickles across the country. But why, I have no idea, like you mentioned in pre-show, well, Blake, because it's June. Urban Meyer said nothing when he stated this week that they might be one of the most talented teams ever. Like, a lot of people think that. And he talked about offense, defense, special teams. He talked about the coaching staff. I mean, Urban Meyer might not be wrong here. It's what we've all been discussing about Ohio State since they've done so well in the portal. And look, it's been known that they went out and spent money in the portal. I guess my thing is, or my question to you is he wrong?
Okay, here's where I'm sitting with this. I look at this roster and I think it is tremendously gifted, and it's also super deep at a number of important positions. I'm talking about at receiver, and you moved on from Marvin Harrison Jr., who went on to the NFL, and the receiving room I think is more diverse than it was last year, because when Emeka Egbuka was unavailable for spurts throughout the season, it felt like there was really no secondary option. Now Jeremiah Smith might be a huge, important player for them. Carnell Tate is going to be a sophomore. Emeka Egbuka does come back. There's a lot of options. The running back room is super gifted. Their defensive line is too deep. Their secondary looks phenomenal. But I do not want to put all my chips in the table to an argument like this, saying that they're one of the best ever, because there have been some ridiculously gifted teams in the history of football that we have watched. And it all starts with 2019 LSU. It starts with 2001 Miami. 2018 Clemson is one that comes to mind. multiple Alabama teams that we've seen that they've won national titles, particularly that 2020 team, which maybe we didn't get to see the full scope of their dominance had they have been able to play a full season. So I just don't want to chalk up a team as one of the greatest ever, because there are so many ridiculously talented teams with Heisman Trophy winners, first-round picks, when this team hasn't stepped on the field yet. And this team last year fell short of the accomplishment of the goal, which is beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten, and winning a national championship. They went 0 for 3 in all of those things. So we need to wait before we crown something like this. And Urban's going to prop up his team, which is understandable. But as a non-Ohio State affiliated individual, Blake, I would like to wait before we make that statement.
But see, here's the problem I have. That's not what he said. And I think that's how it was taken.
It is.
No, what he said was,
I watched the video. You want me to read the quote?
There's a mass, yes. And when you get to the word could be, I want you to stop. Because
as of now, this is one of the most talented rosters in the last decade, maybe ever. That's a big statement, said former Buckeyes head coach Urban Meyer.
No, you got to go to the video. That's not the direct quote. Go back and watch the video.
It is.
No, it's not. Where he says could be.
I watched the video and I pulled this from an article. Do you have it written down and it's a different quote?
Yeah, I have could be.
When I'm going to go pull up the video.
This is from the USA Today. Urban Meyer states that Ohio State, and I'm quoting here, could be one of the best college football rosters of all time. And I watched the video. So if it's not could be, then I have a big problem with my argument.
So he says this is the most talented, one of the most talented rosters in the last decade.
One of the most talented rosters. So regardless if it's could be, one of, could be, whatever, I think he's not wrong, though. I don't think that he is wrong in saying that they could be one of the more talented rosters that we've seen. Now, to your point, they have to get on the field and prove it. I don't think anybody's going to argue. It's why we play the game. I mean, we don't just talk about the talent they have. You got to go out there and play the games. Joe, I'm not necessarily for sure that he's wrong in the sense of, like you mentioned, I do think that they have question marks. Obviously a lot of people's question mark is Will Howard, the interior of their offensive line. Okay. But Joe, look, what we've seen from kids in the portal, it's ridiculous. I don't know if Will Howard's not going to be better than he was at Kansas State with the talent that he has around him. I don't know if you have two transfers, one we'll talk about in a minute, that might be at running back, that might get actual reps at running back. What do they do? So I understand why everybody's like, they haven't even played a game yet. And, well, of course it's Urban Meyer. He was at Ohio State. No, but the truth is, it's what all of us have been talking about with them, about how highly talented they are. Joe, they have one of the best odds to win the national championship. They're at 2, right behind Georgia. When we do our preseason rankings, hold on one second. When we do our preseason rankings and when we talk about teams that we think that are going to make the playoff, Joe, it's going to be right there. And what we've already labeled and said has been, everybody around college football has been, hey, it is national title or bust for them. Now, if they don't get there, then that's going to be on Ryan Day, who's under a lot of pressure, and they failed to meet the expectations of it. But to say that we can't look at them at the current moment on paper and say, Joe, name another team that has more talent than they do right now.
Georgia. Well, so this is what I was just about to say. There's another angle I'm going to get to in a second. But
so Georgia,
the fact that they're not even the number one in the national title odds, because we all know that Georgia's the most gifted team.
Neither was
the most
those teams that you talked about. The 2001 Miami team wasn't. The 2019 LSU team wasn't. The 2018 Clemson team wasn't. In 2018 and 2019, you know who the best odds to win the national titles were? Go ahead and say them. Alabama. So we look at that. So, Joe, there's 100.
Wait. Forget the title odds for a second, though. You and I are both smart enough and have done enough preseason research to know that the Georgia team is
I'm not going to dispute.
Very, very talented.
There's only one. So there's only one. So basically, Nick Saban in Athens, has a better odd and has more talent. Sure. But there comes a point where, Joe, We're not going to say that there's 129 other teams besides Ohio State that on paper at the current moment has more than they do. Because you would be a fool to run out here and say that there's 129 more teams that have more talent than they do.
Obviously, I'm not going to make that statement that there's 129 teams that have more talent. That would be a dipshit. Anyone would be a dipshit to say that. But the point is here. The point is here, Blake, is to crown a team as a champion essentially before the season's been played is where the red flag goes up for me. And I think that you mentioned that there are some roster question marks. A lot of the teams that we have talked about and we've brought up that had these historic seasons that were so freaking dominant throughout every single play, every single game, they were talented front to back, and they were led by gifted quarterbacks that had been there for a period of time. Even one of the best Ohio State teams in the past decade we could think of was the one that had Justin Fields that got to the national championship game. And Justin Fields was a far more gifted college quarterback than what Will Howard is. So I just need to see what Will Howard's going to do and what some of these other roster holes are before I can crown them something that aggressively. The other angle on this, though, Blake, that I think is important to address, though, why the hell is Urban saying this? Why is he selling out his guy, Ryan Day? And why is Jim Tressel chiming in and saying the same thing? Why would you put – there's already ridiculous expectations. We have already said this on this show, that there are unbelievable expectations for Ohio State, and you just screwed your guy by saying this.
But see, that's another angle that I don't understand. If Urban Meyer wouldn't have said nothing, if Jim Tressel wouldn't have said nothing, the same conclusion, if they don't succeed and get where they need to be, the same conclusion is going to be there. Joe, in December, let's just say hypothetically they get bounced in the playoff. What's the narrative going to be about this team and Ryan Day? We're not going to go back to, and say, oh, well, remember in the beginning of the season when Urban Meyer said X, Y, and Z about Ohio State? It's going to be the season's going to be so long that we're not going to remember that.
Obviously, but it's continuing to build the momentum that this expectation that Ohio State has to win a national championship this year.
So what's the difference between me and everybody else saying the same exact thing? Now, I get that Urban is
because
different.
you're not a former national championship winning coach, and also he's
actually that's bullshit, because on NCAA 14 I won 10 straight national championships. So I don't want to hear anything. Okay?
Sorry, Blake, I forgot about that. But this is how declarative the statement was that he had is where I come from. That where I have the problem of why is he selling out Ryan Day like this? And to add in Tressel's quote for anybody who didn't see it, I've never seen that many great players in that building all at once. Every position, every place you turn. So Ryan has done a great job. Ohio State has done a great job. They're both so declarative. They've both been around really good teams that have gone to national titles. Why? Why would you put this on his shoulders?
I understand what you're saying. I understand it. I just don't think it matters. Like, it's not going to care. Like, Joe, it's a pebble or a grain of sand on the beach when on everybody else that's going to be attacking them if they don't succeed. Again, let's just say hypothetically in December that they lose to Michigan. Is anybody going to really pull up what Urban Meyer said in June?
No one is going to, and it's not about that what happens at the end of the season, they fall short. No one's going to go,
what happens if they –
this is all Urban Meyer's fault.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's play the opposite card of all this. What happens if they succeed?
Then mission accomplished.
No. If you build in the beginning, there's got to be a yin and yang. See,
I think actually, to answer that question, I think it makes it more exciting if they succeed.
That's fair. So there is a yin to yang to that. Now, I'll give an example because you brought them up at 2019 LSU. For everybody on audio, I'm pointing to a picture of Joe Burrow.
Yep.
At the Manning Passing Academy, Joe, I say Joe, but I don't mean you. I mean the other Joe. I don't know which Joe I'm talking about.
My brother.
Joe Burrow came out at the Manning Passing Academy in 2019 and said, we're putting up 40 points a game. The clip goes viral. They're like, there's no way. Tall staff LSU's not doing that. And they did. So there has been an inverse of there being a lot of buzz around a team that has succeeded, and it's really helped them and motivated them like, hey, man, we got to live up to these expectations. People can be motivated by a lot of things. You brought up another point, Will, that you talked about it before, the Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel throwing Ryan Day under the bus. You talked about Will Howard. John, I think I'm going to change on you a little bit. Actually, I'm not going to change. That was a wrong way of saying it. I don't know, and if today's game, that system, quote unquote, quarterbacks that make the right decision in college football aren't the ones winning national titles. I really don't, because you're talking about J.J. McCarthy, who we had a problem with. You legitimately are looking at Stetson Bennett. Well, Mac Jones also was not a highly tooled or talented dude, in my opinion. Told everybody in the draft that. He wins a national title in 2020 because he's making the right decisions. So does this guy behind me. So I get what everybody is saying about Will Howard, but I think I have enough faith in Ryan Day to help him develop and be better.
Okay, I get that, but I don't like this depiction of him as if he's some really strong, nice, easy decision maker.
No,
a lot of the
24 touchdowns passes last year and ran for another 10. So
let's pull the important context. Against Texas, he had 1 interception on 26 for 41 passing attempts. Against Oklahoma State, 3 interceptions. These are the toughest games on his schedule. He had 2 interceptions. Oh, no, sorry, I'm misreading that. 3 interceptions against Oklahoma State. He had 1 against UCF, 1 against Missouri.
He got hold against Oklahoma State.
1 against KU. He threw a lot of picks in their most difficult games. I would flip it on you. I think he is more big, toolsy quarterback that needs to be reeled in. I do agree with you. I think Chip Kelly and Ryan Day are going to reel him in, but I don't think that he falls into the Stetson Bennett, J.J. McCarthy bucket. I don't think he does at all.
Okay, I could see the inverse. I think he did make a lot of really good decisions last year that he just didn't have the dudes on the outside to help him either. Joe, he can throw a go route and have 2 Megatrons out there that will go and get the football too. There's a difference when you're around dudes though, which is going to make him look like he's developed more. Joe, this team was on the precipice of getting to the playoff last year. They're not getting worse quarterback play.
No, but this has been my argument. This was my argument the whole time, and why I pissed off Ohio State fans at the time is I argued it wasn't clearly an upgrade. It could be an upgrade. There is potential for him to be better than Kyle McCord, but it's not like there's a litany of tape of him taking over games and dominating. They both have had games littered with interceptions. That's why I have some pause for what we're doing here at the quarterback position. I feel like there's a little bit more certainty when we talk about those Alabama teams, those LSU teams. Yeah, I just don't know what Will Howard is going to be
in that LSU team. People were questioning. They thought they were going to lose to Texas in that Week 2 game.
Well, but you guys knew who Joe Burrow was, and you felt
but see, here's the thing.
Good about it, at least.
No, I mean, Burrow.
He also didn't just transfer in. He had already been there for a year.
Correct. That's very fair. But, again, I saw a kid who had 10 TDs and 10 interceptions come into LSU the year before and win the SEC West with far less talent on that team than what Ohio State did. So if you're going to use the LSU comparison, it has happened before. The other thing that you mentioned, Joe, I think more than that, their interior of their offensive line, I think could be an issue that nobody wants to address. I do think that they have a question mark there. Now we'll talk about that when we get to our deep dive with them.
Yeah,
I'm a little weary on the interior of their offensive line. Other Ohio State news though here is something that was kind of shocking is Ryan Day saying that Caleb Downs has been. Joe, he didn't say that Caleb Downs is going to take some running back reps. Sometimes coaches just say that, they mean it. For whatever reason, they got to say it or feel obligated to say it, and it never materializes that way. It never happens, and everybody forgets about it. Secondly, the problem is, though, he's in meetings per Ryan Day, so it's a lot different. You're taking him out of the DB room. You're putting him into a running back room where you're going through those meetings. Joe, I'm not 1,000% sold that he might not be right there, that he might get some carries.
Yeah, for a little context for folks at home that didn't play college football like you and I did, there's two different ways that meetings could be structured during the off season, during spring ball. You'll maybe have position meetings, defensive meetings at later parts scattered throughout the day when you don't have practice, whatever it might be, because you're trying to accommodate class schedules. But once you get to in season and you get to camp, everybody is in position meetings typically at the same time. Everybody is in O or D meetings at the same time. You go to your designated position rooms, you go meet with your designated coaches, usually around the same time. There'd be a very rare occurrence, and I would doubt, unless I'm misspeaking here, that Ohio State would structure their meetings so that he could attend both. So you bring up another good point in addition to what I said earlier, where one, I don't love the idea of your most gifted player on defense taking hits at a position that is a very physical position where he's going to get tackled. It's so much easier for wear and tear. And I know he's not going to get a ton of carries, but I am a little fearful of what can happen because we've seen plenty of guys have freak injuries at running back. And then the other side of this, he's already very natural at the position, but I just would rather and feel more comfortable if he was in defensive meetings. I just don't get, it just feels very gimmicky. And I know you were trying to recruit him and this was part of it, but it just feels a little too gimmicky when you don't need another kid at running back.
You know what I'd do?
What?
Play one of the season. I would start him at running back and give him a carry and then not give him a carry the rest of the year. All right. In all seriousness,
that would be funny.
in all seriousness, though, I don't disagree with you. I think that Travis Hunter and look, I'm going to use a baseball reference here. Shohei Ohtani, Jack Caglione, who's in college now. Joe, I feel like it's just more acceptable for guys to do two things, right? Like I think that we're to a place now where, Joe, we're seeing it. I mean, you legitimately have a guy that might be playing for a national title in a couple days for Florida, Jack Caglione, who's been a pitcher the last 2 years. He's been at first base. He's hit over 30 home runs. You see Travis Hunter in college at Colorado doing it. But I get what you're saying. He's my number one DB in the country. And I wonder, Joe, that if you give something to something else, meaning, you know, like the old business adage is if you're not 100% in, you're 100% out, right? Like you got to be all in on one position. You know, I thought that Nick Saban always gave a good quote about guys that wanted to go two ways. Be a master of one thing. Don't know a lot of things about don't know a lot about a lot of things. Has he mastered that position? No. Is he one of the best DBs? Yes. Joe, but I understand giving him a carry or two. Okay, like see what happens. And look, you know what's going to happen the first time he fumbles, he's going back on defense, and there's probably not going to be a word about it. So I don't want to overreact to any of this, but you recruited him by telling him that. And look, it might not ever happen. He might be playing mind games, meaning Ryan Day. I don't know.
That's a good point. That's actually a very good point to bring that up. And the context here in the quote.
Who do they play week one? Do they play anybody big week one where he's got to be playing mind games?
I don't think so. I'll pull up their football schedule.
I don't think
you do bring up the good point though that they play Akron and then they play Western Michigan, then Marshall, then Michigan State, then Iowa, and then Oregon is their first tough.
So they go through 7 weeks of the season playing patty puffs, and we're worried about the Big Ten legitimately having a 9-game conference schedule when everybody in the SEC is playing a big-time Power 4 opponent in week one.
Okay, let's not. Let's. No. Yeah. Okay. We're this isn't the daily rant about the SEC schedule being harder. To continue what we're talking about here, I agree with you. It is kind of better that you would want a guy to be all in on one position. And when you get to the NFL, like Travis Hunter's not going to play two positions in the NFL. He's just not going to. It doesn't work in football. You can do it in baseball. We've found that it's more possible in baseball because there's a lot less preparation required to play two positions. And
I don't even know Jack Caglione. I think he's a lot like Travis Hunter talking baseball wise. I don't think he pitches at the next level. I mean, the dude's literally got a rack of ribs that are his forearms. You know how big a rack of ribs are? I mean, that dude, and he's got the cuts with the ribs and the bones too, man. I mean, to your point, I agree with you.
But this all does come down to the most important part here. Travis Hunter plays multiple positions because they've got some stars, but a relatively thin roster that's being built. Travis Hunter gets to play both ways because he's close with Deion Sanders.
And right.
And they need him to. They need the spark. They need the plays, and he's able to. They've got 2 elite running backs, and they also have a 4-star that they just brought in James Peoples, who was the 7th rated running back on 247 Sports this past cycle. So they're fine at depth, man. I don't think this is you just don't need to do it. It's just not necessary.
I don't think it's a depth thing. I really don't. I just think it's a
not depth thing. It's not like he's going to bring you anything that either of those or 3 of those elite players couldn't bring you.
Very true. We do have a couple comments here. Big Tom says Ryan Day will screw it up. 2-4 in bowl games, 1-3 versus that team up north. TTU ends that team up north. They don't call them Michigan.
You have Ohio State followers on your Facebook?
Oh, do I? Actually, believe it or not, I got a lot of like Tennessee, like SEC and Ohio State fans. The only non-SEC team that follows me religiously is Ohio State.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
But my man, he's really good friends with Bill King, our good buddy over there in Nashville. He says he's also 1-6 versus top 5 teams, 0-3 versus the SEC. Yeah, I mean, Joe.
This is where I come down.
Well, with all that being said, it's not wrong, but everybody knows not that, okay? Like that's deep statistical stuff. But their fan base knows it. Everybody knows it. I just don't think we're going to be pulling that up about Urban Meyer in December if they fail.
Yeah, but the whole point, though, to reiterate that where I'm coming back to, Day hasn't accomplished anything yet. So I just think it's like a little bit getting ahead of ourselves.
Still go away from beating Georgia and going to his second national title. Like
you love to get mad at me when there's there's an if and or a but or a coulda, shoulda, woulda, man. Like they didn't win that game.
Okay,
we can't sit here and pretend that they did.
You can't use my strategy against me. I hate when you do that.
Well, that's what you get for for using that premise.
Elks70, our good friend Elks, since a $5 super chat says, Joe, go watch the tape. McCord was scared. He didn't go through his reads and wouldn't throw to the open guy. Howard actually reads the play.
I will say, and I think this gets misconstrued when I make these statements that I don't think that there's much separation. They're not the same quarterback. They're not the same type of player. McCord actually was higher recruited. That was McCord's biggest issue last year, and why we said that he'll be better at Syracuse is because he's going to be in less of a high-pressure situation. The pressure got to him. Kids get the yips all the time at any position. I've seen it at so many different positions on a football field. It happens all the time. I will say, though, that it's the opposite version here where with Howard, you're talking about he does make the reads, but he does make some very risky decisions. I've watched him shit his pants a couple of times. That Oklahoma State game, people really forget about that game. That was
pulled, and that was the birth of what Avery Johnson, was it not?
I don't want to speak with certainty on that. I don't know for sure, but I do remember watching that game.
Yeah, and I was just asking. I don't remember.
That was the birth of Ollie Gordon, though. That was when Ollie Gordon exploded onto the scene.
Don't mess with the Cowboys in October, man. It's something about an orange team in October that normally has success, dude. Don't do it. It's the month of orange, or month of October is orange, man. Pumpkins.
What other teams are you referencing? What other teams are orange that do? Trying to think who you were going for there, or you're just saying that?
I'm just saying Oklahoma State, really. I mean, Syracuse has upset Clemson.
That's true.
In October, they're orange. They're the orange. I mean, if we're being honest. All right.
Cocktober, baby.
Yeah. Shane Beamer. Oh, well. By the way, I'm hearing some interesting things out of Arkansas very quickly. I think Sam Pittman, if things start off rocky, I think they have a plan in place to pull the plug.
Yeah, it doesn't sound
the game that they're going to pull the plug in.
So
So
you think you know what spot it's going to be?
I think if they are going down again before the LSU game, they will pull the plug.
Man, that sucks for him. I don't even know why they kept him around if they're anticipating when they're going to get rid of him.
I don't know, but there's some deep chatter. I hope it doesn't happen to Sam Pittman. But, Joe, in today's college football, you just don't ever know. And you know what you don't really ever know? What's going to happen? Recruiting. So we're going to come back, talk about USC, talk about the Trojans and some of their recruiting woes. It's been a big topic of conversation. Let's talk about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. We come back next to talk about some USC recruiting. Stay with us.
Ruffino and Joe Show is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, which is the best, without a doubt, premium collegiate apparel brand that is out there. They have over 150 different colleges that you can choose from, whether you're an Illinois fan or a Rutgers fan, maybe you're an LSU fan like Blake, or maybe you're an Alabama fan, whatever it is, even Idaho. They have so many different designs for so many different football programs that I can guarantee you're going to find some great stuff to help root for your favorite team. I've already gotten my Notre Dame stuff. Blake has his LSU stuff. Make sure you head on over to homefieldapparel.com to check out your team's collection of clothing apparel that they have on the website. And when you do so, when you check out, make sure you use promo code RuffinoJoe to get 15% off your order. That is RUFFINO, Ruffino Joe. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com and get your college gear today.
This is why I tell you need to get into college baseball more, because Dylan Cruz, first at bat in AAA, just hit an absolute piss missile out and right. Paul Skeens that's taking over Major League Baseball. Dylan Cruz. Here come the Tigers, okay, in Major League Baseball. You say you want to
make the final? Did you guys make the College World Series?
Yeah, we're still technically the reigning defending national champions.
But you won't be.
You don't know that. Anything can happen, you know.
Well, they're just going to suspend play?
I mean, they did it in 2020.
Okay, I'm sure pandemic's coming right around the corner.
All right. You know who does feel like they're going through a pandemic right now? USC. Joe, it's been the talk the entire day, at least maybe the last couple days, but the last day for sure, about USC recruiting. They lost some defensive linemen. Juju Lewis, their 5-star quarterback, might be on, maybe his way out the door, some people believe. Your thoughts on what's going on at USC with recruiting?
Yeah, so they lost the commitments of 5-star edge Isaiah Gibson and then 5-star defensive tackle Justice Terry, two very highly touted recruits. You mentioned Juju Lewis. If you listen to any recruiting shows, and I listen to one of my favorite ones is the 247 Sports recruiting show. That one is fantastic. They talk a lot about how it feels a little off by how much attention he's giving a lot of these other schools. And all I'm saying is that there's not a lot of certainty there as you let in.
Rustin, I am not going. Even today said on Crane & Co. that he thinks that he's going to Auburn. So it's
a lot of people think he's going to. There's a chance that he flips to Auburn.
Correct.
Right. I'm not going to hit the panic button, USC fans. I'm going to try to be a little level-headed about this, but this isn't great. It's good enough that we're early on in this cycle. It's not even July yet, when there's a lot of commitments that usually do come around the 4th of July. It's good for you that even if you miss out on these kids, maybe you could still convince them to come back, or you're going to be able to replace them with other premier talent. Maybe it's not a 5-star, but if you can get other high 4-stars, it's still replaceable. It's not as bad as what happened with Florida this past cycle, which on signing day, they lost a bunch of kids and almost lost a few others because of some late last-second recruiting. But all I will say, man, Lincoln has not done a good job of recruiting defense in his entire coaching career. He has very rarely developed at that position. And I think a lot of kids get excited about the opportunity to play for USC, play in Los Angeles, and then they have conversations with guys like Kirby Smart. And you said this in the open. I think this has a lot more to do with Kirby slamming his fist on the table and saying, you guys aren't taking anyone out of our area. Well, you're not taking 2 Georgia kids. You're not taking kids out of the South. 5-star defensive linemen out of the South, which we have succeeded and dominated at over the past 5 or more years that he's been there. I think a lot more of it has to do with that than it has to do with Lincoln Riley.
This could have been any coach in the country, Joe. It could have been literally anybody in the country. Now, I think here's the statement that I think Kirby Smart is making. Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry were supposed to be in Los Angeles on the 21st. So this Friday, they were supposed to be in town, go through a visit, and go through the weekend. The message I think is being sent here with Griffin and Terry decommitting is, look, they were supposed to go to teams that they were committed to, and Kirby is sending a message to everybody else. Hey, I know that you're look, I know that you're doing NIL stuff in the beginning before we really get things going in recruiting. You might want to just stop because you're not getting kids from here. And it wouldn't have mattered if it was Lincoln, if it was Ryan Day. Now, Ohio State is kind of in the mix here with some of these, so we'll monitor this. But I think that this has a lot to do with it too. And the kid Griffin or Terry, you never know. Ohio State seems to be in the mix. Joe, you got to recruit these type of dudes so that you have the ability to fix your things defensively. Now, I think that the issue here with talking about, and this being Lincoln and it being the defensive side of the football, he does have a new defensive staff. And if you're going to get those type of bodies that we ridicule him of not going and getting, you're going to miss every shot that you don't take. So I understand what you're saying. It's not a great look for him. Joe, this time last year, they weren't trying for this. They weren't trying to pull this off.
That's a fair point.
Okay,
fair point.
So now there's a difference in reference to now that he has DeLeone Lynn. Joe, recruiting has been different from them defensively. Maybe Alex Grinch did not recruit like DeLeone Lynn is and was and is going to. So I understand what you're saying. It is a big loss. These 2 defensive linemen, though, okay, going somewhere else doesn't surprise me. I think what people are surprised a little bit more by is Juju Lewis leaving. Now, Joe, I'm about to tell you something that I think that you will agree with. I always see, majority of the time, not always, because Caleb Williams did this. He did it the opposite. Joe, I think it's easier for West Coast quarterbacks to go to the South and to the East Coast than it is from an East Coast kid to go out West.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like kids from California are going to go to the South. Bryce Young, Jaden Daniels coming down. I know he went to Arizona, but coming down to the SEC. We constantly see more of that. Lewis being a guy that's literally on the East Coast, making his way to the West Coast, I never thought was really going to be a work for them. Now Auburn gets in the mix here. So Julian Lewis being from Carrollton, Georgia, right there close to Auburn. Okay, like it's not far from Auburn at all. Joe, that just makes too much sense. He can be with the same type of explosive offensive coaches and not have to send his family to the West Coast 8 times a year.
Yep. No, it's a great point. It's where I think the recruiting hasn't really come to fruition. Part of it is trying to go and get these kids from the East Coast is just a tough sell. But you mentioned here, whatever happens with Lewis, it is very concerning if that does end up coming to fruition, that he does end up choosing to flip to Auburn. I raise the red flag at why are these kids decommitting so quickly? Why weren't they in the boat for the long haul? What were these conversations like? Because it just seems really weird that this is so quick of a turnaround with these recruits. I just don't know what's going on. And it makes me wonder if there is an inability to maintain long-term success in recruiting. They've been fine at recruiting, and this has been the best lead-up cycle that they've had, as you've mentioned. They didn't touch anything this competitive last cycle and the cycle before that in July. They weren't in that range. But I just don't understand, why can't they keep these kids committed? And is it foreboding that they're going to continue to struggle to keep kids committed? And on top of this, recruits seeing this, how do they stay bought in knowing that these other kids are deciding to change their mind? How can they stay bought in on playing for USC when other dudes who they're in group chats with are leaving the group chats?
Can I tell you what it's going to take? You ready?
What? Yeah.
Money. And tons
but I mean,
of,
it's Los Angeles. They're supposed to have as much money as these
Joe,
other.
Have you ever heard somebody talking about the Trojan Collective?
No.
Okay. And Joe, the opposite's happening in Oregon. The complete opposite is happening.
They've got Nike bankrolling them.
Joe, we're talking about LA. Okay, like
you're right. I mean, you're very right. You're very right.
Like, let's not act like that there's not money there. Like our buddy Eric Weinberger sent me LSU shirt today, like a rack from TJ Maxx. That some bitch was $37. And I'm like, bro, that would be $12 at our local dollar store. Like, I mean, what are we talking about here? If USC in recruiting wants to get serious, you got to do what Dan and them are doing, because Dan is going to go out there and legitimately wreak havoc in recruiting. So I know that there's been a lot of talk about them, Joe, in reference to what they're doing, but I think the biggest part here is I think Lincoln is trying, but I don't think he's got all the pieces in play.
Well, this is where it comes down to is, yeah, it's all nice and dandy that he's trying, but does trying win you championships? He needs to do more than try. He needs to finish. This goes in line with everything. He hasn't finished at Oklahoma when they were going to the playoff, and in his first couple years at USC when they fell short in the Pac-12 championship game. They completely fizzled out last season. It feels like they're going 90% of the way and just not finishing. That has been his problem his whole career.
Well, Joe, it's not. I don't know if it's that they don't have talent in the state. I think they tried to go.
There is talent in the state.
Well, 100% there's talent in the state. I mean, look, you look at what Oregon got last year. Aiden Breland, the defensive lineman from California, commits to Oregon. Jericho Johnson from California, 6'3", 366, Joe. You think that they need somebody like that kid that can stuff up the middle? So they also go, Joe, multiple places to get other DNs and other places to get defensive talent. Legitimately, the West Coast is going to Oregon. So I look, he's got to there's this old saying in the South. I don't know if it's necessarily said everywhere else. Joe, you got to lock the state down. You know, I know where the team that I cover every day, you know what everybody wants to talk about and hear? Lock the state down.
Yeah.
Lincoln's got so many leaks in his boat, the Titanic would be smiling.
And Kirby's literally doing this. That's the funny part. The juxtaposition
Correct.
of the two things is that Kirby let a couple kids get away, and he's coming back, and likely, if I bet at least one of these kids commits.
Oh.
And it's the proof of how important it is to get the regionality and then expand from there. I'm looking at the top the industry rankings on On3 for the California recruits. Dijon Lee is 87% projected to go to Alabama. Husan Longstreet is a quarterback who is projected to commit to Texas A&M. Probably weren't really in conversations there. Adonis Curry is projected a cornerback, projected to go to Texas A&M. Noah Michael, 70% projected to go to Oregon, 11% to USC. Madden Faramo, linebacker, is supposed to commit to Notre Dame. Like, there's just a lot of these kids, man. A lot of the top kids. I look down here, and they're going to Oregon. They're going to Texas A&M. It's just he has been unable to get these kids to stay in the damn state.
It's a problem, man.
It's a huge state too.
And look, LA's got. Let me tell you something that I think that doesn't necessarily benefit USC. I don't know. This will just be my last point, but I don't know if the downturn of LA hasn't hurt the USC brand.
It's a fair point. I mean, I don't like this city. I don't like this city.
I mean, Joe, it took you what 5 hours to get to the airport? You said
no. It takes me. I live right near the airport. It takes me 20, 30 minutes. Actually,
that's even ridiculous in and of itself.
Yeah, now that I say that out loud, it takes me 30 minutes to get to the airport, and it's like a couple miles away. It's like 4 miles away.
That is absolutely bonkers. I think the downturn of LA, people are leaving. So, look, I hear all that. I also can sympathize for Lincoln. Like, hey, man, this whole place is going down. It's not just me.
I think also part of that, and it's something that I every time I've talked about recruiting, and I've mentioned this, naturally, like a lot of families have since a little bit before the pandemic, and especially accelerated during, a lot of families moved to Texas, to Arizona, to Nevada. And that's why now Arizona wasn't a recruiting hotbed, and it's turning into a big recruiting area. We're seeing that Texas was always that good. And Nevada's had an improvement in the level of recruits that they've had. So not only is it guys maybe don't want to stay in the state for college, but on top of this, they might also have a desire, or their family had a desire to leave and they already left. So guys that were previously from the state are playing high school ball in a completely different location.
Well, look, Texas ain't got no state income tax. So that's why a lot of people are going too. Before we get out of here, Sco Ducks on YouTube with a $9.99 super chat says Oregon beats Ohio State in a close game.
I don't know if I'm ready to give a pick to that yet. Sco Ducks, thank you for the super chat. I don't know if I'm ready to give a pick for that. I feel dirty giving a pick to that game.
Are you legitimately going to pick Oregon?
I lean Ohio State, but I think that Oregon can win that game. That game is going to be really close. That is going to be one of the most important games of the season.
Oh, no doubt. The entire October slate is insane. Like, go down each week in October. It's absolutely
This is why bigger conferences are better, because we get more good games. You remember last October we didn't have shit to talk about, to watch? We're watching G5 games, Blake.
No, we were not.
A little bit.
No, we were.
There were some terrible games in October last year. There were a couple of weeks we had no games to talk about.
You legitimately had a team that combined for close to getting up to 200 points.
Which game are you talking about? Why am
I mean, LSU and Ole Miss were on their path. We had some bonkers games.
We did, but there were. I remember a couple instances there was not much going on.
Speaking of Ole Miss, remember the entire month for Alabama and everybody melting, saying that Saban was done, even though he was, and then they made a playoff.
Everybody meeting us.
Wait, that was you.
You did it too. Don't act like you didn't do that too. You changed your tune at the end of the season. In the beginning of the season.
Midway through.
No. Yeah, midway through.
Before they played LSU, my tune had been changed.
No, it was much later than that.
No one. Go.
You were talking shit with the best of them, man. You were talking more shit than I was.
Yes,
you were.
No, I wasn't.
Yes,
all right. No, I wasn't. All right. Well, all right. No, I wasn't. Go ahead and say it. Yes.
No, and just end the show.
Okay. God bless it. See y'all on Sunday. Y'all have a good one. Peace.